I was riding in my car the other day and I was just thinking about something that really kind of hit home for me in a big way. Lately I kind of been like looking online and I kind of got real acquainted with this one dating web app. I'm really attracted to Latina women. And there was one on there that I talked to, I met, and unbeknownst to me, it seems like this dating app where these women that I sometimes just talk to just to get to know them, they seem to like be really focused on me, and it's kind of strange because I don't consider myself to be the kind of man who wants all the attention. I'm more or less the guy that don't want the attention, and I kind of just want to be a fly on the wall, when I'm around. I don't want to be the center of attention. Now, if I'm doing something like singing a national anthem or performing, well, of course, I'm in the limelight in that moment just because I'm performing. But usually with my personality, I kind of like to be real low key and I like to observe. I don't really like to be the person that's really trying to take the spotlight. I don't do that, not unless, it's something that I have prepared or planned and I'm performing for somebody. Then, it's my time to shine. But anyway, this young gal that I was talking with, or lady, I noticed when I went on the dating app just to see if she might be there, I realized she wasn't online. So after thinking, a lot of these young women just tend to think that, finding a man like me and having something happen right away between us is going to occur like real fast, like right now. And don't get me wrong, I like younger women, but they tend to be very impatient. The older ones, they're not like that. They can be patient. They can wait as long as needed because they've kind of been around the block a few times, probably with a few other men, which I don't really care too much for. So it's kind of like if you want a younger one, you got to move fast. But if you want an older one, she'll move at your pace, but you just have to keep in mind that she probably already had experiences, which probably is going to leave a little bit of a bitter taste in your mouth. Okay, so you gotta take what was given. But anyway, after thinking, if I was like any other guy and I wasn't seeking to know God, seeking to achieve the things that I see myself achieving spiritually in this life, then I would just go head over heels for this one particular woman and do everything I can to be with her and miss out on the biggest opportunity that's right in front of me. And it just dawned on me that, I think that God really places man on this planet to test him in a way to show how he sees the world and him in it. In other words, what's really the most important thing of value to our hearts, to our minds? Because it's going to show. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that this beautiful woman, she could be taken and be off the market quick. I've had a few of them that I really was digging. I liked them, and they're no longer available, at least not on that platform that I was using, or that I am using actually. But the thing that I really, 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 really am trying to do and tell myself is that it's not about me marrying a beautiful woman. Although I wouldn't mind, although that's really what I'm trying to do, that's not the most important thing to me. The most important thing to me right now is for me to reach the highest level of perfection, both naturally and spiritually, that I can possibly achieve while living on earth. So I use the dating platform. I look at all these beautiful women and I tell myself, you can have one of those. But is it about just having one of those women in your life and then being content? Or is it about having something greater? Because you got to think, marriage, all marriages on earth will end. Both spouses or couples getting into the relationship, when they enter into the covenant, they might be young, starting out. Then eventually they get older and die. And so if all I'm doing is seeking to be married to a beautiful woman, that feeling of glee, that thrill, is only going to last for so long. The sex, it's only going to be good for so long because you got a life that you got to live, and the life is filled with problems. And if your relationship is emotional based, oh, I just like her, she like me, that's emotion. That changes. You know, two people that think that they can never dislike each other all of a sudden can be enemies. You know, it don't take much. Just one little dispute, one little disagreement, and, you know, both y'all not liking each other. That happens all the time. And the couple that ends up in that situation, when they first starting out and they dating, they thinking everything cool. They feel so good about each other. They never disagree. They always compliment each other. And they just seem like it's just such a wonderful experience just to be around somebody who has a like mind, has a like spirit. That's fine and dandy. If you talk to most people just in general, you'll find some common ground of interest. You know, even your worst enemy, before you even know that person, who they are, if you just talking to them and you just having a lighthearted conversation on the surface, you know, y'all can talk about things of interest and you not even know that that person is truly, you know, not a good person. It could be really, really a very, very, very rotten, evil individual. But on the surface, you'll never know, you know, and that person can talk with you and y'all can just vibe, and you believe that, yeah, man, you know, me and you get along real well. Matter of fact, it's how it was with a man that took over being pastor of a church that I was attending. You know, I had been attending this church ever since I was 10 years old. And the first pastor passed away, and then the one who came after him, you know, I had known him ever since we had been going there. Never thought that this man would be just an evil tyrant. I mean, just a very vicious, vile, a thief. I mean, a crooked person. Excuse me. But on the surface, when you talk to him, he seems so friendly. Just a very talkative person, and you would never think that he was just a snake with venom. And he'll bite you in a heartbeat. You know, I got many of circumstances, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will mention this one. I decided to join a choir, and I was kind of unsure about it. I had a friend who was she wouldn't pressure me, but she was kind of compelling me to join. So I decided, and at that time, a choir robe cost $150. And so I paid $150 and I sang in the choir maybe for like a week or so. Then I realized, this just conflicts with my work schedule. I can't, dedicate an hour, 2 hours after I come home from work to go to a church group meeting at a building and then sing and then go home. And it's like 10 going on 10:30, 11 o'clock, because we've been singing for 2 hours. It's like, man, that's most of my evening. And I got to get ready for work the next day. So it's like, this is not going to work. It's too much of a conflict of interest. And I kind of saw it head in that direction before. And that's how come I really didn't want to join the choir. But I feel like, I could sing. I better make good use of my singing voice while I'm still young and got my life and my energy, sing for the Lord, So I was kind of dealing with that whole thought, I didn't know exactly what to do, should I use my gift in this way? Should I use it in another way? If I'm singing for the choir, I'm singing for the Lord. At least that's what I thought during that time. So I joined, and then eventually I had a change of mind about 2 weeks later. So I go to the man and I ask him, I joined the choir, but I had second thoughts. I don't think I want to be in the choir no more. Can I get my $150 back for the choir robe? Because I'm not going to be using it. And to make a long story short, he basically refused to give me back my $150. I gave him the choir robe, I gave that back, but I didn't get a refund for my $150. It's the pastor of a church. So it was like, sorry, dude, you out $150. Screw you. And, at that time I was young, didn't really realize, that this man was just being real criminal minded, To my mind, I'm thinking if I'm a member of your church group and you the pastor, you would want to show love in a way where you want to do the right thing. And I think if a person kind of felt a little ambiguous about joining the choir and they decided not to be a part of the choir, I can understand if I had been in there for like maybe 6 months, 8 months, and now I'm asking for my money back. Well, yeah, it's a little too late. But 2 weeks, you know what I mean? It's like if you go to a store, you buy an item, you usually have at least 30 days to return it. It had only been about just 2 weeks, and he blatantly refused to return or to give me a refund for a choir robe that I was no longer going to be using because I decided not to stay in the choir because of my work schedule. But anyway, I'm just making that point to say this, sometimes you could talk to people and everything could seem so good, when you're talking to them. But when you get to know them and the situation like what I just described come up, then you begin to see that person ain't no good. That's you better stay away from that person, But when you having a lighthearted conversation, and everything is on the surface, and you're not digging deep to really know much about them, y'all could talk about a number of things. You could talk about sports, you could talk about some sort of new product that just came out or something that just happened right now. We got this corona virus going on. A lot of people talking about that. So, that's what I mean by having a lighthearted conversation. In other words, you could talk to just about anybody and find a common ground of interest and not really know who that person is until, you experience a situation with them and then their true colors come out. So that's all I'm saying is that when people get married, when they dating at first, they might feel a certain way about each other. And they base everything off what they feel. What they don't understand is that feelings can change. Just like I felt like the guy was a decent man. He was a pastor of a church. Thought he was a godly man. Anyway, years later, that man ended up being voted out of being a pastor. They had voted him in, and then 19 years later, the same members that supported his ministry voted him out. So they basically fired him. So that shows you, it took them a while to figure out he wasn't no good. But he could talk a talk. I mean, he could just sit down and talk with you, and you could feel like, oh, it's a good person. He's a godly man. And he knew how to salt and pepper his speech, real well, especially when he was talking to people that went to the same church group or that believe what he believed in. He would use all these amens and hallelujahs and praise the Lord and make himself sound like he's really a godly man. And you would never suspect that man is a thief. He's a crook. And I suspect that a couple of years ago, his wife died. I suspect that he may have had something to do with that. I don't know for sure, but it was just strange how all of a sudden, I heard that his wife had just passed away. But, you look at the situation, they have been moving around from place to place. They lost their house that they had. They had a lot of trouble, turmoil going on within their own immediate family and extended family, especially with his in-laws or her mom and his father-in-law. A lot of stuff came out, about this man and his dealings with his in-laws, and then this man with his immediate family. I mean, he had lost his job. He worked for UPS for quite some time, lost his house, just going from place to place, renting this place, renting that place, while he was a pastor. And come to find out, the man never really had a stable job. He was pretty much living off the income that his wife was getting. I don't know exactly what kind of job his wife had. I believe she had a government job, and he was pretty much just living off the income that she was providing, because he really wasn't working. He called himself being a handyman, going around fixing stuff for people, but he got a lot of complaints about the poor job he was doing on people's projects that they hired him to do. He had called himself putting up a new roof on my mom's house, charged her $3,000, and he did a shoddy job. A couple years later, my mom had to get her whole roof redone because they did such a shoddy job, him and his partner. I mean, things like that. This man he was a pastor. And, he just really built up a real bad reputation for himself. So, the situation with the choir robe and my mom's roof and many, many other cases that I don't want to go into, because I just want to make this recording not too long. It's just sad. You think that when you talk to somebody that they will never be the kind of person that would just do you wrong like that. But if you base your relationship based off of feelings, then feelings change. Feelings come and go. You could be feeling happy one moment and sad the next. Good one moment and bad the next. You can't base a relationship off of feelings. Otherwise, you don't have much. And when the feelings change in both the man and the wife from good to bad, then you ain't got much of a marriage, because there was nothing there to begin with other than feelings. Oh, I like her. Oh, she like me. We just get along. That's what you're thinking at that time, because that's how you feel. But if you're just basing your opinion of her off how you feel, that's going to be tested. And so I'm just saying all that to say this. I'm glad that God has showed me that marriage is not about feelings. Marriage is not about, do you like her? Does she like you? Do y'all get along? Yes, you want that to definitely be the case. You want to like the person that you marry. You want to get along. Will you get along all the time? No. Will you have disagreements? Yes. You know, but ultimately, you don't want to marry somebody you don't like, you know. And I just think that too many men will rush into a marriage with somebody because that's all they see is what they feel when they see that person. So if I had went head over heels for this particular young woman, then the relationship would be based off only what I feel, not what's true. I don't really know her that well. She says she's available. Okay, great. Not a big problem. But here's the thing. I'm not looking to be with any one woman. And I say that to say this. If I get married, I'm not married now, but if I do invest in the institution of marriage, I'm going to set up a paradigm of polygamy. That's because when I read in the Bible, that is really the paradigm that God had set up with Israel. That's the paradigm that God gave provisions for with ancient Israel. And that's the paradigm of marriage that God has never, not one time, condemned in his word. So people might say, well, you a polygamist? I would say, well, yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Jesus describes the story of 10 virgins in Matthew's 25th chapter. There was 5 wise and 5 foolish virgins, and there was 1 groom. And Jesus describes the story about the 5 wise virgins getting oil to meet the groom. And the 5 foolish didn't take the opportunity to put oil in the lamps so they can go meet with the groom. But they waited until the groom had arrived. Then they want to go bother their neighbors in the middle of the night and ask them for oil so they can go meet the groom. But, you're not preparing yourself, obviously. If you have to wake up your neighbor in the middle of the night and ask them for some oil or any other thing. So to me, Jesus is saying the ones who were proactive, the 5 wise virgins, they acted on their faith. They believed that the groom was coming. And so they got enough oil to keep they lights lit up so they can go meet the groom when he comes. But the 5 foolish virgins, they were reactive. They didn't do anything until he finally came. Oh, now he's come. Oh, okay. Let me go get some oil now. It's too late. That opportunity came and gone. But Jesus described this story because it has both a natural and a spiritual meaning to it. And he was telling this to his kinsmen who were primarily Jewish. And he was basically saying, look, I'm the husband. I'm God in flesh. And I'm here to take a bride unto myself. And if she has prepared herself, she will come in to the marriage supper of the Lamb and dine with me. And that is really what it was in ancient times, is that marriage was a job opportunity for women, especially poor women. And you can read the story of Esther and Mordecai and how Esther presented herself to the king uh, at that time when I believe Israel was in bondage. I want to say this, it was the Babylonians, but I might be wrong. But they were in bondage, and Esther presented herself to the king and told her the issue that was going on with her people to deliver them. But Esther used her beauty, to be able to get the king to be interested in marrying her. The king was a polygamist at that time. And Jesus, when he tells a story in Matthew 25, is also describing a polygamous paradigm. This is one groom who is looking to hire several bridesmaids. Now, the reason why they call bridesmaids is because when a man had a business, if he wanted to hire a woman to perform a certain duty or to provide a certain service, she was considered a maid. Not that she would just be responsible for housekeeping services like cleaning the kitchen or the bathroom and cleaning the house and cooking. No, she was a maid, meaning that she was a servant, and she would provide services according to her strengths. If she was a financial advisor, a consultant, in some other area of expertise, maybe in real estate, maybe in any kind of counsel that she might be of good use, then a man could hire a woman to provide that kind of service, and she didn't have to be his wife. And she was called a maid. They just called a maid. That was just one word for saying that's his employee, but it's a woman. So women were called maid servants. Men were called manservants. And it's the same thing today. We have employers and we have employees, and employees can be both male and female. Doesn't matter. So in ancient times, a man who was wealthy or had a lot of prominence in the land, maybe he wasn't a king, but he had a lot to offer. If he hired a maid, that would be a great job opportunity for her. Because if she was poor, whatever he was going to give her for her wages or her salary, she can in turn use that to live off of, and then she can support her father's house. If her father, needed money, or if her mother needed money, she can use that money to help support them. So, being a maid was huge if you could find a man who could afford to hire you as his maid. Whatever expertise you had, it didn't always have to be house cleaning services. It didn't always have to be chef services as far as cooking. It could have been something else. Whatever it was she was good at, she could offer her services to provide for that man. Now, if that man chose for this particular woman, I'm just making up a scenario right now. If he chose this woman to be his maid, and he hired her to perform a service, and he liked her service, and let's just say he wanted to turn the relationship into a romantic relationship now. So now we're moving from being a maid to being something else. Then she was no longer just a maid. She would be called a bridesmaid. So now she transitioned from one phase to another. And when she would transition to be a bridesmaid, that means she was really that man's wife. And they could now provide conjugal services to one another. And so that's what it means to be a bridesmaid. In other words, she still is going to do her normal duty, whatever it is he hired her to do. But when she become a bridesmaid, now we talking about a whole different type of contract that includes conjugal services as well. And so, with that comes, child rearing, possibly, and raising children. And so the man had to take into account how much it was going to cost to maintain a maid. How much he gonna pay each month just for her services. But once she became a bridesmaid and now she becomes his wife, now he has to take into account how much is it going to cost per year to not only pay her salary for her services as a servant, but now as a bride, because now she's providing conjugal services. And if they decide to have children, now she's going to be not only a wife and providing those services, but she's going to be a mother, and she's going to be providing another set of services. So she's going to be doing 3 jobs in one. She's going to be providing services as a maid. Let's say that she's a cook. She's going to be a cook. If she transitions into a bridesmaid, now she's going to cook. She's going to be a wife, providing conjugal services to her husband. And now, if she has children, she's going to be a mother, and she's going to be providing services to raise the children. So that's 3 jobs right there. And so the man had to basically figure out, okay, how much can I afford to pay her for all of her services? And so the more responsibility he would give her, the more she can negotiate for her wages. And so that's really what Jesus was describing. That's how come these 10 virgins were waiting anxiously for the groom, because it was a job opportunity. And the 5 wise virgins knew they had one chance to get this right while the groom was in town, because he can go anywhere and find women to hire to work for him. And if he was a wealthy man, he probably could be providing, a lot. He could be offering a lot of money just for them to provide a service for him. And so that was a very valuable thing, especially if she was poor. She came from a poor family. So we also see this too. I'm just going to touch on this story just real brief with Sarah, Abraham, and Hagar. Now, Sarah was barren. She couldn't have any children. And God had been promising Abraham that he was going to have children with Sarah. And so the promise that God had made with Abraham, they tried to make it come to pass a different way. Sarah figured that she was too old, and so she vouched that Abraham take their handmaid, Hagar. She was an Egyptian. She was just a woman who at first was attending to the needs of Sarah and Abraham. They were her employer. She was an employee. She provided a service. Now, I'm not exactly sure what she did, but let's just say she cleaned the house, or she cleaned the tent. Maybe she herded the cattle and watered the flock and did a number of many different things. But once Sarah figured that she couldn't have any children and that she was too old, and decided that Abraham should take their maid and impregnate her so that Sarah could now have a son, then what we find is that Abraham gave Hagar a promotion, and she became his bride. Because in order for her to provide conjugal services to Abraham, in order for him to provide conjugal services to her, they had to be married in order for it not to be sin in God's sight. Because God considers sexual activity a sacred service between husband and wife. And Sarah and Abraham knew this. So Abraham took Hagar to be his bridesmaid. She's now his wife. Then she gets pregnant. She bears a son, calls his name Ishmael. But that really wasn't what God wanted. And I believe it was Genesis chapter 18 where God appears to Abraham in the theophanies, and he prophesies to Abraham that Sarah is going to get pregnant. And then Sarah laughs and says, should I have pleasure with my Lord at this old age? I'm just paraphrasing, but she laughed saying, I'm an old woman, and now we finna have sex and get busy, and I'm gonna have pleasure with my husband now. I'm pushing 100 years old here. I believe Abraham was 10 years older than Sarah, so I'm not sure when God visited him, but let's just say he was 90 and she was 89. She was up in age, but nevertheless, Sarah ended up having sex with her husband Abraham, and they conceived and bear a son and called his name Isaac in her old age and in his old age as well. But the point I was making is that Hagar at first was just a maid, but when Sarah decided that she wanted to have a son and that she was too old to have one, Abraham promoted Hagar to be his wife. He was already paying her wages for whatever duty she was doing, but it didn't include conjugal services. But once Sarah said, okay, well, since I can't have children, go ahead and sleep with her, impregnate her, and whatever son she had, that's going to be my son. I'm going to adopt him. That was Sarah's plan. And Abraham agreed with it. And so that's what we find is that marriage is a job opportunity. And when a bride or when a maid becomes a bridesmaid, that's a promotion to a whole nother position. She's now providing maid services and services as a wife to her husband, in particular conjugal services. So going back to Matthew 25th chapter, that's what we find is that this groom is hiring not just maids, but he's hiring bridesmaids. He's giving them a promotion right off the bat. He's saying, look, you can provide these services as well as conjugal services. And if you provide conjugal services to me as your husband, I already have everything that you need. Food, shelter, clothes, life insurance, medical insurance, dental insurance. You're covered. It costs to maintain your lifestyle every year. Let's just say for all 5 of the wise virgins, let's just say it costs $35,000 for each one in today's day and time. Let's just say that, well, the groom has all of their expenses covered. And not only that, let's just say, she gets pregnant or one of them get pregnant and they bear a son or a daughter. The groom has enough money to cover the expense to raise a child. Food, clothes, education, medical insurance, life insurance, everything that he's giving the mother. The groom is responsible for all of that. And in today's day and age where we have modern technology, we have what we call vehicles, that would also include, vehicle insurance and house insurance and anything else. The groom is responsible as an employer to provide all the necessary things for his wife to have. And if they should have children, he should factor all of that into his budget to know exactly how much it's going to cost, if that's the route they want to go. Now, a groom don't always have to hire a woman to be his wife to bear children. I've said this many a times. Not every couple that gets married is designated to be a procreator. God designated certain people to procreate. And God gave a command to Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. And he also gave a command to Noah, his sons and their wives to be fruitful and multiply. That's the only time God gave a command to procreate, is to those two families, Adam and Eve, Noah, his 3 sons, and their wives. That's it. So every human being, or I should say every man that gets married, they don't have to have children. It's not a command for them specifically. It was only a command to Adam and Eve and to Noah and his sons. I mean, I suppose God could appear in a vision to any one particular man and request that they, procreate and have a son or a daughter. In a case like with Abraham, God had already prophesied that he was going to have a son. So it wasn't necessarily a command that Abraham was going to procreate and have a son, and his son was going to bring forth, twin boys, Esau and Jacob, and then one of those was going to be, a patriarch of the Jewish nation. That wasn't necessarily a command. It was more or less just a prophecy that God was telling Abraham, this is what's going to happen. And so Abraham kind of already knew, what was to be expected of him in that sense. But quite naturally, most men and women in ancient times wanted to procreate because that was a gift. They wanted to have children. And I suppose it's not a command, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like God saying, well, if I didn't command it, don't have children. That's not what it is. It's a privilege. If a man and a woman want to have children, they can. If they don't want to have children, they don't have to. But I just often hear some people think that, well, if you marry, you're supposed to have kids. That's what sex is for. No, sex is not just only for procreation. I've heard that some people believe that sex is just for procreation, like it's not supposed to be intended for pleasure. Well, I would beg to differ. And I would say, unless God commands a person to be a procreator like he did with Adam and like he did with Noah and his 3 sons, then it's a privilege that any married couple can take the opportunity of, granted that they consider all the expenses and the costs that it takes to maintain a child. But it's not commanded, but God is not disallowing it either. So with that said, I'm just saying this, a man doesn't have to have children if he chooses to marry, one woman or multiple women. It's up to him. And if they agree that that's the contract they want to enter into with that man, then his bridesmaid can say, yeah, we agreed to marry you. And, we understand that we're not going to be bearing any fruit. We're not going to be having any children. Or the man can say, if you want children, you can be a surrogate. We'll go to the doctor's office, have a consultation. You serious about getting pregnant and having children? You can carry the fetus of a fertilized egg for a couple that wants a child. Many people do that. And matter of fact, being a surrogate mother is not a modern day practice. It's actually ancient. Mary was a surrogate mother to Jesus. People don't see it that way, but that's really what she was. She was a surrogate. God impregnated her supernaturally when she was overcome with the Holy Ghost. And that's something that we don't see every day, and she was a virgin still. But being a surrogate mother isn't anything new. I mean, that is one case that we have in the Bible where Mary was a surrogate mother to God the Father and bearing his son, Jesus Christ. So, if a man wants to marry multiple women and tell them, hey, if you want to be a mother, you can be a surrogate mother and bear seed for a couple who can't get pregnant, she can do that. The Bible doesn't give any command against it, and I suppose she rightfully would be a mother to any child that she might bring forth into the world, because if an embryo is planted inside her, okay, and it grows for 9 months, guess what? The blood that's circulating in her womb is also going to be in the embryo. And so that embryo, even though it's already fertilized and it's another woman's egg and another man's sperm that's not her husband's, that embryo is going to be sharing the DNA of the woman that's carrying it, because it's going to attach itself to the vaginal walls. And once it starts to grow, all the blood vessels are going to grow in that embryo. And so she will definitely have, DNA with that child. And that child will definitely be, in a sense, her child. Not biologically 100%, but that child will have a little bit of a bloodline, a little bit of traces of blood, perhaps, with the surrogate mother, just because of the connection of the embryo to her uterus. So, I'm no scientist, but I suspect that, if a woman really wants to get pregnant, she just wants to experience, childbirthing. Some women just want that. They may not really want the responsibility of raising a child, but they just want the experience of being able to give birth to a child. That's one way to go. You could bring forth a child into the world, and maybe the true parents of that child might let you rear that child for, a year or two, breastfeed the child, feed the child, visit the child when it gets older, really have a relationship. I don't see nothing wrong with that. The Bible doesn't condemn it in any way. But nevertheless, the point I'm making is this about, a groom hiring brides or hiring women to be his bridesmaids. Jesus is giving this story about, a certain groom hiring 5 wise virgins that had their lamps filled with oil to keep the fire burning. But the 5 foolish did not have enough oil in their lamps to keep the fire burning. And so when the groom came, only the 5 wise virgins went in to meet with him, and the door was shut. Now, this meeting they had, I suppose it could have been a banquet, a supper, or some sort of meal that they were having, the bridesmaid were having with the groom. But the 5 foolish were left out, and they knocked on the door, and Jesus says that the groom said, "Depart from me, ye that work iniquity, I never knew you." Now I'm just kind of paraphrasing, but basically what Jesus was saying is, Spiritually, I'm the groom. Israel, I'm your husband. You all are my bridesmaids. Are you supposed to be? You're supposed to be providing a service for me. We made a covenant together on Mount Sinai. I gave Moses the commandments to give to you. And guess what? Since that time, you've been unfaithful to me. You have been serving other gods, worshiping other gods, bowing down to other gods, sacrificing to other gods. But you were my wife. And I was your husband. And I provided everything you needed. I gave you water out of a rock. And I fed you with manna. And if that wasn't enough, I ensured your victory over all of your enemies, including the mightiest empire on the planet at that time, which was Egypt. I destroyed that whole army in the Red Sea while you crossed over on dry land. Not only that, I conquered all the armies of all the nations of Canaan for you. You inhabited cities that you didn't even build, vineyards that you never even planted. You inherited flocks and herds, treasures, all the wealth that the people left behind that I slew for you. All these armies that you conquered, I was the one that went before you and conquered them. I gave you everything you needed, but still that wasn't enough. You went and played the harlot and you worship all of these gods. And now I come to you in the flesh, in the person of Jesus Christ. You my bride. But guess what? You're not prepared. You don't have enough oil in your lamp to keep the fire burning because the Spirit is not in you. But the 5 wise, which are the remnant, God always had a remnant of believers, of true worshipers throughout the history of his marriage with Israel when they entered into the covenant at Mount Sinai. It was always a remnant that God spared. Those were the ones that were faithful. Those were the ones that Jesus, I believe, is saying entered into the chamber with the groom. And now they are enjoying the supper because they were proactive. They had enough oil to keep the fire lit. And to me, that is so symbolic of everything that I'm going through and that every man goes through, is that God wants to know who is faithful, who is a true worshiper. Jesus describes himself as being the groom, and he has the reward. And what is that reward? Eternal life. And to me, I see man always seeking everything else in life, all the other thrills in life, women, money. If it ain't that, they seeking some other thrill, And God is saying, I wonder who gets it. I wonder who understands who is the greatest gift, or what is the greatest gift a man can have. And most men will ignore. They know the answer, but they will ignore it when they're in their strength, because they know that the greatest gift is God himself. You see, God is the gift. And that's what I was telling myself just a few days ago. I said, if I was like any other man, I would go head over heels for this young woman. I would do all these things to try to get her. And maybe if I did get her, I'll find out that she's not even really what I'm looking for. I felt this way. I felt that way. She felt this way. She felt that way. We thought it was a good match, but it was all feelings. We didn't know the truth about one another. And the truth is, feelings change. And can a marriage like that really last? When it's just based off of feelings? No, it ain't gonna last. But if that's really what I value in my heart as the most important thing in life is to be with her, then guess what? I'm missing out on the greatest opportunity that's right in front of me. God told Abraham, be perfect and walk upright. I am thy exceeding great reward. God is the rewarder. That was a test that God gave Adam. God had made woman from the dust of the ground and presented her to the man as his assistant. But with this extra human being in the picture, God wanted to see if Adam was going to be wise enough to understand the truth. Now, what we read is that Eve ate the fruit first. Then she gave it to her husband. Now, Adam at that time could have refused to take it from her hand. And he could have refused to eat it altogether. He could have rebuked her and told her, God said, in the day you eat thereof, thou shalt surely die. And walked away. That was his choice. Had he had done that, what that would have said is that he understands the greater gift. That God himself is a greater gift than the creature that he made for the man. In other words, Adam would have realized that the creator is of greater value than the creature. And so that's what I had to tell myself. I said, this young woman wants me to go and pursue her. But what about God? He right there. He's the greater gift. He has the words of eternal life. Now, as much as I like her, as much as I'm attracted to her, I would rather pursue him than her. Why? Because he is the gift. He created the woman, and he can make many more. God could have made 100 to 1,000 more Eves for Adam. He made her from the dust of the ground. You know how much dust particle there is in the ground? And that's what Adam didn't get. God had the ability to make as many women that for Adam that he wanted to. If this one defected and didn't want to do right. Adam failed to see it. And God wanted to know, does this man understand? I got the power to make more. It's in my power to give him anything that he needs. He head over heels for this one. I just made him just one. But I got the power to make 100. I can make 1,000 more Eves for him if he wanted it, if he needed it. I made her from the dust of the ground. Life is in me. It's in my hand to give it. It's in my hand to take it. Does he understand that I'm the greater gift than the thing that I created? Does he understand that I'm of greater value because I'm the creator? She's just a creature I created. Does he get it? Adam didn't get it. He failed the test because he failed to realize that God is the greatest gift that you can have. Not her, God. Because when you have him, you got everything you need. And so I had to tell myself, you know what? If you can't have her, hey, you still got God. Because he's the greater gift. And I would rather have him than to have anything or anyone else. I would love to experience, what it's like to be with a woman like that. But if I can't have her, at least I could walk away knowing I still got the greatest gift that I could ever have, and that is God himself. And so I keep telling myself, Paul, it ain't about having one woman. You're a polygamist. It's about being in the position. It's the position that you can have to get whatever it is you want. That's what you coveting, or that's what you should covet, because God has that position to give to you. It's yours if you want it. But understand, as his servant, marriage is a service that a man and woman are supposed to provide to God, not to themselves. Too many men get married just to have sex. And the woman is always focused on seducing the man just to have a man. But that's not what the marriage is really for. That's shallow. Oh, we just want to get married just to have sex. Well, that ain't gonna last. Both of y'all gonna die. Then what? Most men don't even understand the primary duty that they have before God in marriage, and that is to present themselves and their wives as sexually chaste virgins, spiritually, before God. And that was Adam's number one duty. Every single day, he was to present his wife, Eve, sinless to God. He was supposed to take the lead, steer her away from evil. They only had one command: don't eat from the forbidden tree. That was it. That's all he was responsible to do. If Adam could have kept that duty before God, everything else was taken care of. Because God is a spiritual husband, and he takes care of his wives. He takes care of all of our needs, just like the groom took care of all the needs of the 5 wise virgins. They knew, we got a husband, we got an employer. He's going to provide food, shelter, clothes, anything else we might need. And if we have children, he got enough to not only provide for our children, but for our children's children. So we good. From generations on down, we married a good man. And that's how Jesus saw himself. And that's how he sees himself now, as a spiritual husband to spiritual Israel, is that he's the gift. He's the greatest gift. Why? Because he has the words of eternal life. So, if I happen to meet this woman, or if I happen to talk to her again, I would love for her to understand, I'm nothing. God is everything. Because this little old love affair that we might have, that's going to come to an end. Because I'm going to die one day, and you're going to die. Then what? I can't resurrect myself from the dead, and neither can you. But Jesus has the power to resurrect a man who had been in the grave for 4 days. His name was Lazarus. Listening to that story today as I was driving to work, and it just floored me. This man had been dead for 4 days. They already wrapped his body up and put him in a tomb. And Jesus told Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. I mean, you listen at what he said, and then what he did right after that. He said he was the resurrection, and he proved it. He raised a man from the dead who had been dead for 4 days. There's not a man on planet Earth that I know of that had that kind of power. And Jesus did it by simply calling his name. Lazarus, come forth. That was all he said. Is Jesus the resurrection? He sure enough proved it. He said, he that believes in me shall never die. Jesus has his reward in his hand. What is his reward? Eternal life. He told the malefactor on the cross, after he had said, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus said in response, this day you shall be with me in paradise. Now, I believe personally that he was telling that man, I'm granting you eternal life. Jesus just spoke that man's eternal existence right there. Jesus has the words of eternal life. That's far greater than what any one man on earth can give to his wife. Is to know that when you die, God has the power to resurrect your dead body into an immortal body. And so that's the gift that I want, that God has to give to every man, whoever so willing is to receive it. The day you hear his voice, harden not your heart. And so that's what I want. And that's what I want to give to any woman that I marry, is to let them know, if you marry me, I'm not the gift. I'm just the steward. God is the greatest gift that you can ever obtain. And if his spirit abide in me, and if you are taught by me, then you might as well have the same gift, and his spirit abiding in you. And if his spirit abide in us, then we both have life in us. That is the greatest gift. So I'm looking to God as my greatest gift, because I value the creator more than the creature. And I think that's the greatest test that God is testing man with, even until this day.